Next up, we have Stacey. As usual, we'll avoid reading your bio as she has proven that that is the next slide. So, with that.
Thank you. All right. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah. There's also a wireless one up there.
All right.
You have to get pretty close to this.
Oh, man. Is this better?
Yes.
All right. I can work with this. So, good afternoon, everyone. So, what? Still can't hear me?
Yeah.
The wireless one off or? Also, I know my feed is a little low. It needs to be taller.
Constructive.
Good, how's that looking?
All right. Can you hear me now?
Okay. How about now?
All right.
Oh,
Oh. Okay, that works. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. So, oops. For those of you who don't know me, hi, I'm Stacey. So, requisite number of certifications and degrees. I've been doing this for a good number of years at this point. I'm 18 years into all this lovely IT stuff. So at present, I work at NIST. I'm also part of Maryland Defense Force Cyber Unit. So get to do some fun things. Principally, I'm doing risk assessments and securing our assets from outside threats. So I'm part of the defense side of things. Also aligned with Nova Hackers and Unallocated Space, some of our lovely hacker organizations back in the DC metro region. And just this past weekend, I became an Iron Man too. So yeah, we have some crazy people in this industry. If you follow any of my Twitter feeds, you'll see it's a lot of memes, just like what's coming up, so be prepared. So this is supposed to be talking about, attacker mindset for defenders. Now, how many of you are on the defense side of things instead of like penetration testing? Okay, that's good. And how many are more on the attacker penetration testing side of things? And everyone else is somewhere in between. Okay, that's a good mix. I can work with this. So one of the things we tend to see is that we don't really have an attacker mindset on the defense side of things. We tend to just be methodical, go through, here's our compliance, here's our checklist, implement things, and we're good to go. There's not a lot of thinking evil. So amongst normal people, we're a little abnormal on the defense side. Yeah, you know this. So with that in mind, talk a little bit about red teaming, blue teaming, our lovely new purple teaming, and what exactly we're looking at in terms of our risks, our threats, and what all we can do. Because you know what? Internet is serious business, y'all. And I'm sure I don't have to explain to anyone here just what exactly information security is. But I just gave a presentation to a bunch of DevOps. So I had to, I included the whole process of, we're here to help you help yourself. Because it really is a team effort. And we're not the bad guys, although security is often thought of that way. We're either vilified as hackers, whether we're defenders or attackers. Thank you, media, for changing that wording on us. Previously, it was just thinking outside of the box, which is what we really need more of. We have enough box checkers out there. And if you say this word, you know what to do. Information security is where it really is. But if you have to explain it to someone, they will understand this. Compliance is not security. And if you actually look at the Rev 4 for the NIST 853, it actually includes in there that, compliance isn't security. The purpose of compliance is to keep us on a common thread, moving forward, so that, our systems have a commonality for security, that we can trust one another. Because at the basis of this, it's all about the trust. And you all know, we've had these breaches. They've been PCI compliant. That has not helped them, because compliance is just the beginning. Everyone does compliance wrong. It's not a checkbox to be just marked off and forgotten about. It's a starting point that we can build from. And this is another one of our issues being defenders, because we get faced with implementing all this compliance. HIPAA, SOX, PCI, ISO, you name it. There's companies that need to have all of it. And management doesn't necessarily understand that we can layer this so that we're working everything. They look at each individual thing as its own silo. So we end up re-implementing the same things and just reinventing the wheel when there's no point to it. We can leverage it, and we can do inherited controls and start doing cross-referencing. We just need to work on educating everybody in the entire process to be more security mindful. It's an uphill battle. It doesn't get easier. And I assume everyone knows CSI Cyber. And no one likes it, right? It was still better. Scorpion was better. That's true. So, along with this, we have people that fall under the compliance officers. This is part of my day-to-day. I review risk assessment reports, our lovely Nessus output, and other output from tools. You have to be constantly identifying what's the issues on your network, what's false positives, what's really out there. Because things change. People don't do their patches. If you looked at one of the recent Verizon, DBIRs, they had stuff from 1999 that there were vulnerabilities out there that had been exploited. So you have stuff that's out there that who knows when it was updated. And people just aren't cognizant of this. Or they've gotten busy, because our sysadmins have a lot of work to do. They're not necessarily security-minded, and that's not really part of their duties per se. Their duty is to maintain the systems and ensure it's functioning. Money. But we still need to integrate into all these fields, thinking more like the devious attacker. Hey, I didn't do my patch cycle this month, so where's my weakness now? Because there's something new every month, but it's not really the hottest new 0 day that's going to end up getting you compromised. It's going to be your patches from a couple years ago. Right? I told you this would be entertaining. So with that, let's make it a little more interesting. Because, hey, what are we all here to do? Hack the planet. Everyone wants to be an attacker, right? So what does that usually tend to mean for us? For us, this is generally penetration testing. But not everyone needs this. From the defender's point of view, we end up getting a lot of well, adversarial relationships going. Because whether it's an internal team or it's an external team, you're fighting them because they're grading you. And this is a perception. We're being graded on how we have secured our systems. So immediately, we don't like you. So clearly, we need to work on changing that perspective. Part of the purple teaming approach is working with everybody so that we're not being adversaries. We're using this as a learning opportunity. We're making it full cycle, to turn it into a more holistic approach. We want everybody, to do their job and be awesome at it without thinking that, hey, you didn't apply patches last month. That's just not going to work. It's that give and take. Because we can always learn something from both sides of it. I mean, our attackers aren't necessarily doing the best they can as attackers. They miss things too. It just happens. The hardest part is starting to think like the attacker. So my career, I started out doing Unix, Linux system administration before I moved on into security. Well, I had some of the think evil processes going. Yes, I know, shocking, right? But it wasn't fully there. Now if someone starts talking about, hey, I want to implement, this project, can we use, Puppet or Docker? And now my immediate response is, okay, well, how is that talking to things? Where is there a communication where there's a trust level, and how can I exploit that? Because what we're doing is we're exploiting trust. Whether we're exploiting people or we're exploiting software, there's a trust layer there, and that's what we're seeking to exploit. Without trust, it makes it a little harder. But sometimes we need trust. I say compliance isn't security, and it isn't. But it gives us a baseline for where we can start building that trust level. If you've certified a system according to a certain level, whether it's low, moderate, or high, I know the baseline of what security you have actually implemented on that system. From there, I can build a trust layer between your system and one of mine of equal or lesser value. As an attacker, I can also leverage that in order to see, well, with the process the way it is, okay, you've implemented, PCI or NIST moderate. Well, you probably didn't go along and do these things, so there might be something I can wedge in there easily. And it's all about thinking what hasn't been done. Because we're always looking for those little loopholes. So they're so much fun to exploit. And the best thing is the people. Because people are always going to be our weakest link. There's just no way that we're ever going to have a secure system. And this is why security is so important, because technology has taken over our lives. Right now, we live and die by smartphones. We're connected 24/7 to an electronic leash. And so much of our life is out there. And we have the CTF going on, where you can do a little digging on people, see what you can find out there on social media about them. Have you ever had a friend that does this kind of open source intelligence, go through and tell you shocking facts about yourself or what they can find? Now, something like your address if you own a house, that's not really shocking because that's public record. But when you start thinking about other things, what conferences have you checked into on, Foursquare, Twitter, Facebook? When were you last at the doctor? When did your dog die? All this builds more things that attackers can see as far as finding points of weakness to identify, and start building that trust level with you. And we can exploit this. So as defenders, we don't always think about this. We think we need to lock down our systems, we need to hide everything. But we're not thinking, what exactly is it they're looking for? It gets to be a little hard. But, sometimes it's just, we're losers. Some of us share a whole lot. Some people share everything. And it's up to everyone to decide how much you really want out there. Just know it puts you out there at a weak point. I can't comment too much on this, but I really wanted to include it, so I did.
I said, we'll just leave it at that.
There are some highlights in regards to bad security processes and good security processes. Sometimes it's just too easy to get to things because people circumvent the rules. Yeah. I mean, rules are helpful. They're a pain, but this is why we have policies. This is why we have procedures. This is why we have compliance, if it's done right. It should, make certain things not happen. But again, this is really easy stuff to do. Because it's fun. Because people don't follow the rules. I mean, it gets kind of scary at times. And you realize that, hey, this stuff really isn't, all of our data's out there, it's reachable. So what are we going to do? We need to start working together conceptually, do our blue teaming. Some places, well, actually most places in my experience, they don't have internal red teams. They don't have the internal penetration testing. Generally, it defaults down to vulnerability assessment, which that can be enough for some organizations, but it really depends on what your assets and your data are valued at. So, at least on a yearly basis, you should have a more in-depth audit where they are doing a little bit more in terms of testing both your personnel and the systems.
What do you mean testing personnel?
Well, penetration testing or some variation in between. Because as much as some people would like to think that simply running Nessus every month is going to secure their systems, there's a lot more out there that we need to test and, keep tabs on. And actually keeping tabs on and having those metrics for what have we done? How much, what are our attack vectors? How many attackers have we had? And how many have been successful? Well, if you can even tell. And that's always the hard part. Because not everything is set up to where you can tell whether you've necessarily had an intrusion. We've seen these where it's been over a year. OPM comes to mind, where they were in there for over a year before it was found out. And these are the things that we need more in-depth testing. This is also why you want to have a good relationship between red teaming and blue teaming. And when you're having that in-depth testing done, so you can get these things fixed. Because otherwise, everybody's just going to be unhappy. I'm sure you're all familiar with what are our primary targets. And this is pretty much everything out there. It can be client lists. It can be government secrets. There's something of value to everybody. And it's not necessarily what you think may be of value to you. your competitors, they'd really like your client lists and what you're paying to your suppliers, because that's going to give them an advantage when they go negotiation. So there's a lot more things that we have to think of in terms of where our vulnerabilities lie. I mean, how many people, being technical, would you assume that client lists is a priority? See, a lot of times it just falls down to, this is our intellectual property. This is the important stuff. This is where we're building our walls. And other things that end up being administrative tend to fall by the waysides. So an evaluation in terms of valuing the data itself so that appropriate defense mechanisms can be in place everywhere. Because, hey, we're here. It probably wasn't our fault, though. We're usually protecting the stuff. Of course, realizing what your threat is actually coming from. Now, a lot of places like to go overboard, but the reality is not everybody is a target of cyber terrorism. It's the hot, sexy thing that's out there, but most of your threat source is really going to be people that are poking around or your direct competition, because these are the people that really want your data. And unless you're the government, and then everybody is against you anyway, so, throw it all out there. There's just no winning. Because, security is hard. And part of that is because all of our old methods, everything still works. So back in the day, think Cold War espionage and old school, super old school. These things still work. Our people are the weakest link, and this is our best way of getting in. This includes everything, as far as, we have our old vulnerabilities, and as far as, going up and making friends with a low-level employee, because maybe they don't have direct access to what you're interested in, but they have access to the network. And if you can get on it, then you can leapfrog. And it's fun from there. And I already covered open source intelligence, but there's a lot out there you can find, besides just people. If you go look at government RFPs, sometimes you can actually get a really good idea of what their networks break down to. So there's a lot of data that's put out there. It's just part of the usual business process, but it can be manipulated in ways that, your business personnel may not consider this. It's not a weak point, it's just business. We need a quote for 50 Windows systems running this type of server hardware and software. That's great, but now I have an idea of the footprint of your network without really doing anything besides seeing what you guys put out for an RFP. So now I can limit what I have to do in terms of attacking, and I can start specifically doing that for that OS version, for that software version that you're standing up. And then I just have to find a weak spot where someone hasn't, changed the default passwords, updated. And it's easy. It shouldn't be, but it's easy. So what can we do? Obviously, information security, it kind of covers a broad, very, very broad gamut. But implementing more testing of the appropriate level. We can't just rely on vulnerabilities or vulnerability scanners to be catching all of our problems. There's more to it than that. We have more weaknesses. And we need to start leveraging our professionals that we have to come in, do those tests, and find those weak spots so that we can fix them before our real attackers come in. Obviously, physical and personnel security is always an issue. People are the weakest link, and this is something that everyone just gets, it gets beat into you. Annual training, it really isn't enough, because we all know we just sit there and we click until we're through with it, because it was the same slideshow last year as it is this year. With that, we need to do more interactive training so that they start thinking, oh, you know what, maybe I shouldn't click on this link. Maybe this African prince doesn't really want to send me a few $1 billion. These things still work. They're tried and true, and they still work. Because you know what? Cybersecurity, it's hard. Attacking's easy, but implementing good security. I got memes for days. Obviously, we're all pretty well-certified individuals. And there is a difference between, certification, like the certification glut, and knowledgeable testing. However, it does give us a baseline, because they've at least gone through and done something. So, yeah, we'll just leave that one. But additional training at a professional level. Certifications can help, but certifications are not the end-all, be-all. Actual hands-on working knowledge is way more valuable than having certifications. Much more valuable. And, remember, trust but verify. You are the weakest link. So confirm before you start sending information to people. Should be simple. But there's a lot of hackers out there. Hey, I had to use it. So, remember, call your friendly hacker when you get problems, because we might be able to help you, or we can at least refer you to someone who they know what they're doing, and they can go in and take care of it. And that is it for me. Okay.
Yes. So having worked as both what do you see as being the major differences in the way that you would approach trying to institute adversarial for non-hackers?
So between having the private and public. Okay. There we go. The difference between private and public, it really comes down to, security is still a cost center. So a lot of it's getting buy-in and having the right people in the management level. Along with that, though, you get a lot of pushback in some places. Let's say DoD is a great place to not get pushback because there's directives. So you tell them they have to do something, they will. Fabulous to work with. Civilian side, you get a lot more pushback of, well, why do I need to do this? I don't have the funding, and you just want to show us weaknesses. Getting them to start thinking about it, kind of just showing them, walking them through the process, especially if they don't know security, setting and going through even something as simple as going through an audit with them and saying, these are the things I'm checking against. And it's not a reflection on you if it's not met. This is your opportunity to get more funding. So then they start thinking, oh, wait, I can get the toys I want. So I just need to make a use case. And that will actually help, start that thinking process of, well, what else could be attacked? Because I need to upgrade. So it does help. Money is an incentive everywhere. And just getting it in terms of where people don't feel like you're attacking them and being at fault for something that a lot of times it's, I mean, unless they've completely missed 5 years of patch scheduling, you know, sometimes it's simply just hardware and software issues that it wasn't implemented correctly. So that's been my biggest thing, actually, in terms of having success, because they'll start finding their own ways of presenting stuff to management. Anyone else? Cool. Grex.
What's your favorite type of run? What was your time?
I finished at 11:26
PM, AM?
p.m. I started at 7 a.m.
But you finished.
I finished.
All right, what type of run then?
What type
Clear
of?
run, spice run, you know, what kind of run?
Right now, clear.
Okay.
Yes. According to days, seasons, whatever I feel like. Today it's clear. And if you want to see the medal from Ironman Texas, I do have it with me, and it's huge. So I will throw that out there.